You smile too quickly. Even when your chest feels tight, even when something inside you is quietly resisting, you still smile. Because you've learned that being nice keeps things calm. It avoids conflict. It keeps people around. But here's the truth you don't say out loud. It's exhausting. You walk into a room and immediately start adjusting yourself, your tone, your posture, your opinions. You scan faces searching for approval before you even speak. And when you leave, you don't feel connected. You feel drained. Not because people are too much, but because you are constantly abandoning yourself. You say yes when your body is screaming no. You agree when your mind is pulling back. You laugh when something doesn't feel right. And over time, something dangerous begins to happen. You stop recognizing your own voice. This isn't just about personality. This is not just being polite or being kind. There's a difference between kindness and self-erasure. And your body knows that difference, even if your mind tries to ignore it. Have you noticed how tired you feel after certain conversations? Not physically tired, but mentally foggy, emotionally heavy. Like something has been taken from you, but you can't explain what. That's the cost of being too friendly. Because when you constantly prioritize other people's comfort over your own truth, your nervous system never gets to rest. It stays alert, hyper-aware, always calculating. What do they think of me? Did I say the wrong thing? Should I have stayed quiet? This quiet pressure builds over years. And if you're over 40, over 50, you've likely been carrying it longer than you realize. You were taught that being agreeable makes you a good person, that avoiding conflict makes you mature, that keeping the peace makes you strong. But no one told you what it would cost. No one told you that one day you would feel invisible in your own life, that one day your opinions would feel less important than everyone else's, that one day you would struggle to even answer a simple question honestly, because you've spent so long editing yourself. And it doesn't stop there. Your body begins to reflect it. Chronic stress, tight shoulders, shallow breathing, sleep that never feels deep enough. Because every time you suppress your truth, your body stores that tension. Science calls it emotional suppression. But you feel it as something else. A quiet frustration, a low-grade resentment, not toward others, but toward yourself. Because deep down you know you're capable of more. You know you have boundaries. You know you have opinions that matter. But you've trained yourself to ignore them. You've become so good at being easy to be around that you've forgotten what it feels like to be real. And here's the uncomfortable truth. People don't respect what always bends. When you're always available, always agreeable, always accommodating, you don't come across as kind. You come across as predictable. And predictable gets overlooked. It gets taken for granted. It gets used. Not always intentionally, not always maliciously, but inevitably. Because human nature responds to boundaries, to clarity, to presence. And when those things are missing, the people fill the space however they want. You may think you're maintaining harmony. But what you're actually doing is slowly losing control of your own life. You start living based on other people's expectations instead of your own needs. And the most dangerous part, you convince yourself this is normal. You tell yourself, this is just who I am. But it's not. It's who you learn to be. And anything learned can be unlearned. But before that happens, there's a moment, a quiet, uncomfortable realization. It doesn't come all at once. It builds slowly. Maybe it's when someone dismisses your opinion and you don't speak up. Maybe it's when you agree to something you didn't want and regret it immediately. Maybe it's when you look back at your day and realize none of it felt like you. And something inside you shifts, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to make you question everything. Because deep down, you don't want to live like this anymore. You don't want to keep shrinking just to be accepted. You don't want to keep giving parts of yourself away just to avoid discomfort. You want something else, something stronger, something more honest. But that requires a decision, a difficult one, to stop being too friendly. Not rude, not cold, not aggressive, but real. And real changes everything. That realization doesn't leave you. It doesn't disappear when the day gets busy or when you distract yourself with routine. It stays with you, quietly pressing at the back of your mind, changing the way you see everything you once ignored. Now you start noticing things you were blind to before. The way you laugh even when you don't feel like laughing. The way you say, it's okay when it really isn't. The way you automatically agree just to end conversations faster. It feels small in the moment, almost harmless. But when you add it all together, it becomes something heavier than you expected. You begin to see the pattern clearly. Every time you prioritize being liked, you step a little further away from yourself. Every time you avoid discomfort, you postpone your own truth. And every time you stay silent, even when something inside you wants to speak, you reinforce a version of yourself that is slowly fading. At first, you try to fix it in small ways. You tell yourself, next time I will say no. But when the next time comes, your old reflex returns. The automatic smile, the automatic agreement, the automatic adjustment to keep things smooth. And afterward, the guilt arrives. Not because you hurt someone else, but because you abandoned yourself again. This is where most people get stuck, between awareness and action, between seeing the truth and living it, because changing this pattern is not just about behavior. It's about identity. You are not just changing what you do. You are changing who you have been for years, and that is uncomfortable. You start to feel tension in simple moments. A friend asks for a favor and you hesitate longer than usual. A family member interrupts your plans and you feel a quiet resistance building inside you. A colleague crosses a line and you feel something rising in your chest that you used to suppress instantly. Now you pause. And in that pause, everything becomes different. Because silence is no longer automatic obedience. It is now a choice. And choice brings responsibility. You begin to understand something difficult. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries may not welcome your change. Not everyone will adjust easily. Some will test you. Some will guilt you. Some will act confused when you stop reacting the way you used to. And this is where the internal conflict intensifies. Part of you wants to go back to the easier version of life where no one questioned you because you never questioned anything yourself. Back to the comfort of predictability, even if it meant self-neglect. But another part of you is waking up, a part that is tired of disappearing, a part that wants to exist fully, not partially. You start practicing small acts of resistance. A delayed answer instead of an instant yes, a short pause before agreeing. A simple let me think about it instead of immediate compliance. These moments feel strangely powerful, not because they change the world around you, but because they change the relationship you have with yourself. For the first time, you are not abandoning your own voice immediately, and you begin to notice something else. The fear you had was bigger than reality. The fear that people would leave. The fear that you would be rejected. The fear that you would become difficult or unlikable. But what actually happens is more subtle. Some people adjust. Some step back. Some respect you more. And some reveal who they were all along. And that clarity, even when painful, is grounding. Because now you are not guessing anymore. You are seeing, and seeing clearly is the beginning of control. Still, the discomfort remains. Because every time you choose honesty over automatic friendliness, you feel exposed. You feel unfamiliar to yourself, like you are learning a new language in real time. But something important is happening underneath that discomfort. Your nervous system is learning safety in truth. The constant internal tension begins to loosen, even slightly. The mental fog starts to clear in moments where you choose alignment over approval. And slowly you begin to realize being too friendly was never peace. It was avoidance. Avoidance of conflict, avoidance of rejection, avoidance of discomfort. But avoidance always has a cost. And you have been paying it with your energy, your clarity, and your sense of self. Now, for the first time, you are starting to invest differently. Not in pleasing everyone, but in protecting your own center. And that shift, even if it feels unstable, is the beginning of something far more powerful than approval ever was. It is the beginning of self-respect becoming stronger than fear. And once that begins, there is no easy way back. You can only move forward. And even though part of you still feels uncertain, you can no longer unsee what you have seen. The way you used to operate on autopilot now feels exposed, almost fragile. You realize how much of your energy was spent managing other people's comfort instead of protecting your own stability. There are moments when you almost slip back into old habits. You feel the familiar urge to say yes without thinking, to smooth things over, to avoid any tension. But now there is a gap between the urge and the action. A small space where awareness lives. And in that space, you are changing. Not quickly, not dramatically, but permanently. Because once you start recognizing your own patterns, you cannot fully return to ignorance. Even if you try, even if you fall back sometimes. Something inside you will always know there is another way, a stronger way, a calmer way, a more honest way. And that knowing is what begins to reshape everything from within. Now you are no longer just reacting to life. You are slowly learning to choose yourself even in small moments, and that changes everything about your future from this point forward always. Now something changes in the way you move through your life. You are still the same person, but your internal world is not the same anymore. The automatic need to please has started to weaken, and in its place, something unfamiliar is growing. A quiet strength. Not loud, not aggressive, but steady. You begin to understand that being too friendly was never about kindness alone. It was about fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of not being enough if you stood in your truth. And once you see fear clearly, it loses some of its power over you. You notice how people respond differently when you stop over-explaining yourself, When you stop rushing to justify every decision. When you allow silence to exist without filling it with comfort for others. At first there is resistance inside you and around you, but slowly that resistance becomes less overwhelming because something inside you is finally aligning. You are no longer bending just to be accepted. You are standing still long enough to be respected. And in that stillness, you feel something you have not felt in a long time. Presence, real presence. Not the exhausted version of you that constantly manages expectations, but the version that simply exists without apology. This is where transformation becomes permanent. Not because everything around you changes, but because you stop abandoning yourself in real time. There will still be moments of doubt, moments where you wonder if you are becoming too distant, too different, too difficult. But those thoughts no longer control your decisions the way they used to. They pass through you instead of living inside you. And that is a powerful shift. You start to realize that boundaries are not rejection. They are structure. They are the difference between being used and being valued, between being available and being respected. Your relationships begin to reflect this change. Some grow deeper because they were built on honesty. Others fade because they were built on your silence. And even though letting go can feel uncomfortable, it brings clarity you never had before. You are no longer guessing who respects you. You can see it. You are no longer hoping to be understood. You are expressing yourself clearly. And slowly, your nervous system begins to settle into something new. A calmer baseline, less internal tension, less emotional exhaustion after interactions. You realize that peace was never about avoiding people. It was about returning to yourself. And now every time you choose honesty over automatic friendliness, you reinforce that peace. This is the turning point most people never reach. Not because it is complicated, but because it requires discomfort. It requires letting go of the identity that was built on approval. But you are already moving through it. Not perfectly, not without hesitation, but consistently. And consistency is what changes identity. You are becoming someone who does not betray themselves for approval. Someone who does not confuse kindness with self-erasure. Someone who understands that saying no is not a loss, but a form of protection. And as this new version of you grows stronger, something unexpected happens. You begin to feel lighter. Not because life becomes easier, but because you are no longer carrying unnecessary emotional weight. You are no longer performing friendliness at the cost of truth. You are no longer shrinking to fit into spaces that were never meant for your full self. And that creates space for something powerful. Respect. From others, yes, but more importantly from yourself. Because the moment you stop abandoning your own boundaries, you begin to trust yourself again. And that trust becomes the foundation for everything else in your life. You speak differently now. You choose differently now. You walk away when needed, without guilt dominating your thoughts. You stay when it is right without fear controlling your decisions. This is not becoming cold. This is becoming clear. And clarity is what brings real confidence, not the loud kind, not the performative kind, but the quiet kind that does not need validation to exist. You are no longer living in reaction to other people's expectations. You are living from your own center. And that is where real transformation happens. Not when everyone approves of you, but when you finally stop needing them to. Because at the end of everything, you understand one truth very deeply. Being too friendly cost you your voice. And now reclaiming your boundaries is giving it back. Stronger, clearer, unshakable. And this time, you are not giving it away again. And yet, the most important change is not what others see, but what you no longer tolerate inside yourself. You no longer ignore your discomfort just to keep others comfortable. You no longer silence your intuition when it tries to protect you. This is where real strength lives. In the moments you choose yourself without needing permission. You begin to understand that peace is not found in pleasing everyone. Peace is found in alignment. And alignment means choosing truth even when it feels uncomfortable. You are no longer the person who disappears to keep harmony. You are becoming the person who stands present even when it creates tension. And that tension is not failure. It is growth happening in real time. You will not get this perfect every day, but perfection was never the goal. The goal is awareness. And from awareness, you build a life that does not require constant self-abandonment. You stop living as an edited version of yourself, and you start living as the full version. This is the quiet revolution most people never complete, because it is not about changing the world. It is about no longer betraying your place in it. And once you reach this point, you cannot go back to who you were. You may still be kind, but your kindness is no longer self-destructive. It is conscious, it is grounded, it is chosen, and that changes everything that comes next in your life. From this moment forward, you no longer live for approval. You live for truth, strength, clarity, and the version of you that finally returns.